And so I'm going to really quick run through everybody here. My name is Danny Grimes. I'm a professional GM at Gen Con. I run a lot of Call of Cthulhu. I'm also a maker and a terrain builder and model maker and so forth. Matt, Casey Rift, owns and runs Cobalt Con and the Blackwood Society, and he is currently running a Kickstarter, which is funding really well. And we're hoping to make to our stretch goals by the end of the month. So I'll let him talk a little bit about that. And he also owns the game company, Wisco Games. So then I move on to Brian. I see that guy at every convention, Berg. He is also an author and a game designer in the independent publishing space, and he's the owner-operator of Total Party Kill Games, and he helps us a lot around here as a fellow wizard. And Jimmy Duffy, chief...
I'm a reject. Uh-oh. And,
And
he just... and here, where's the professionals?
That's what happens when you call the tech guy a reject.
That is ironic, isn't it?
It's Dorian. He is. Well, folks, you can't script it any better than that.
How long was that?
Well, we
Less
made
than
it
a minute?
about 180 seconds, maybe something like that. Oh, there he went.
And he started his video, so that'll throw everybody off. One moment, please.
I think I just checked. I think it's Spectrum again in my area. Their outages are just crazy all over the country. We'll have to do something to have a backup. But anyway, I'm very sorry, Jimmy. What I said about you, you're not a reject at all. You are the.
Here, like I said, here we go.
You are the most wonderful. Yeah, you are the most wonderful tech admin ever, and thank you for all that you do. So I did lose my. Okay, here we go. We're back.
We're back. Until I go to the 5-person deal. I'll fix it.
Yeah. So real quick, I just want to say we are Wizards of the Couch, and you can find us all over social media as Wizards Couch or Wizards of the Couch. Also, there's a Kickstarter we're going to talk about in a little while. So I'm going to move right ahead and introduce our guest for tonight. With us tonight is Jim Pinto. He is the developer and designer and I think owner and operator, he'll tell you all the stuff, of Protocol Games and Post-World Games. Protocol Games, he'll tell you more about it, but it's a GM-less system, which is something I'm super interested in. And also in his prior life, he was involved with Legend of the Five Rings, Alderac Entertainment, and was the art director there as well. And he's done a lot of stuff in between. It's a long list. One of my favorite books ever, The Toolbox, was put together by him. So we'll talk about that maybe a little bit as well. So, Jim, are you with us?
I am.
Jim is an international man of mystery. Therefore, he has no photo right now. He is just Jim Pinto.
Cue the Austin Powers soundtrack.
And I want to say that I was not responsible for the incorrect current capitalization of your name. I know.
So you die last? Is that?
I die last, exactly. And I'll beg. I might even be able to offer you something, Jim. You don't know.
Whoa, it's an adult show, but settle down over there.
Okay. I just there's going to be stabbing involved. You never know what you do in that clutch play. So we have some standard questions, Jim, that we have that we ask everybody, but I'm just going to call bullshit on those questions. And like, why'd you get into gaming? And what's your favorite part of gaming? All that stuff. We'll probably cover that later. We were chatting earlier in the week, and you brought up something about your opinion about 5th edition. Now, it's not an edition war issue. It's just an opinion.
Right.
So why don't you share that with us, Jim?
I want to back up and say that if you're one of the OSR guys that thinks you need to bring up the same argument about the old way of doing things over and over again, you can probably shut up. You've been heard for the last 10 years. We get that argument.
Yep.
And we've heard all the edition war arguments to death. One of the things I've never heard anybody else say is how the editions have slowly and more further slid into sort of a meta-conferencing style of play where nothing gets done and nobody has any authority to get anything done, but the game master still has the responsibility to make sure that things get done. So as characters get more and more and more powerful in each edition of the game, powers are stripped away from the game master to make things happen. And so now I think 5th edition is a job for game masters. I don't even think it's fun anymore. I think it's something they need to get paid for, because you're there catering to, like a vending machine, to the consumer at the other side of the table. They're not a player, they're a consumer. And they have an expectation. They've written an 18-page background, and these are the magic items they want at these levels. And you got to make it happen like a job. And I find that trend really unsatisfactory for the largest game in humanity.
Do you think it's a function of it growing so popular? Is it just that, or is there a purpose behind that?
I think when it was done in 3rd edition, I think 3rd edition is when the switch flips, and I think that it's purposeful for the purpose of sales.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody saw this side effect coming, where the players would feel that you need to cater to their every whim, because they have so many feats and powers and things at their disposal, and anytime you bring something up, they have a power to stop it.
Well, as a semi-grognard, I guess I'm not really a grognard, but I would say that I would think that maybe the idea of video games, the ability to be able to pause, select, quest for specific things, probably had some cultural, like whatever we've done to gather that audience is doing things to us too, right? So where are those influences coming from, or is that not important? Who cares? It is what it is.
Right, and that's all fine and good. If that's where role-playing games are going, we need to acknowledge that that's where they're going, and that the game master's role is now a job, and it's not to be an administrator to have fun and tell a story. It's their job now to cater and build an experience, build a specific experience.
Yep.
That tailors 5 or 6 different personalities at the table. That's work. And
do you think that I guess the trend for the game to be more of a story now, everybody wants to kind of tell a story, and it to be a story time session where we're interacting with each other, but it's really just we're creating something together. Do you think that's kind of the push for it, people's desire to do that, or do you think that it's solely based on sales, like you said?
I think that's a really good question. I think that there's something that needs to happen at a session 0 that doesn't happen in a traditional role-playing game. Nobody sits down and figures out how they know one another. Everybody has already come to the table and written a infallible canonical piece of backstory that cannot be argued with. Oh, well, I killed a dragon when I was 6, and that's how I became a sorcerer. As soon as you write something that's stupid, the game master now has to cater to that stupidity and ramp up the rest of the campaign to reflect what you've done at the age of 6.
So there is a product right there that you could sell gazillion copies of. Put together charts that weave player backgrounds together.
Yeah.
Well, I think, but isn't what Jim's saying? The GM can buy that book and attempt to enforce it, but there's now a serious pushback from people who saw every Marvel movie, every Wolverine movie, and want to have retractable claws. I mean, that's an egregious example, but I'm sure it happens. And so, like, I think, there's always been an asymmetry of the commitment of the GM to the players. So part of me kind of welcomes the fact that they're bringing a game to me. They're bringing something. I just wish that they would, I guess I agree with Jim. I wish they would wait until we're all in the same room so that it's a shared experience.
And I wish that they were doing some level of the work instead of doing just the fun part of it, right?
Yep.
I got to art direct for 8 years, and that art direction is easily the best and most fun job at a game company, so long as everybody around you isn't an asshole. If somebody wants to take that job away from me and just make me do the contract part of it or do the art numbering part of it, that's not fun. And you have to do both of those parts of the job in order for art direction to happen. And I think the game master gets stuck with all of the filing, and the players get stuck with all of the, do this to the sketch and let's add this. And they're the ones that are getting to actually paint the canvas, and the game master is the one that's got to file it away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Jim, I mean, I totally see where you're going. And I think most big fantasy games are probably 100% guilty of this, right? But I do think 5th edition D&D is probably the simplest edition that's ever been put out.
Sure.
And so it's much faster. It's easier to educate on the fly. The game master can actually tell a story and not trip over the rules and all the bullshit minutia, right? So I know from my own personal experiences, it is fun to run as a game master. And I think that's part of why it's become such a huge monster, is it's accessible and it's much easier than any other edition of D&D ever before.
But you're just speaking about the book and not the entire culture around how 5th edition is played.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And I can agree with you to an extent, right? I've read the book and I played it once, and 5th is a little more elegant than I expected it to be. But you ran it at that con, and there were 3 people at the table that shouldn't have been there, and there were 3 people that should have. And how much did that detract from the quality of what you were trying to do with it? Because they were bringing all their old bad habits, and they were just, okay, just entertain me. I'm just.
But that's every convention, every pickup game.
That is true. Yep.
But I want to get back to what you're saying about the culture, because I came from a background of judging. I was the judge. We called ourselves GMs, but I was a judge. And the rules, I made a lot of those decisions in the clutch. I wasn't beholden to them. And I would highlight in my first edition DMG the part where it says it's just a guideline and all that stuff. And I definitely noticed this change in 3rd edition that you indicated, but also I was really wanting to create experiences. I was kind of thinking of it like a game. I already was to the point where I wanted it to be experiential, not so gamified. And the rules were just there to settle out things that we couldn't just agree on. And I encouraged people to just agree. So are you saying that is it the thing about creating an experience that is drudgery, or is it that it's dictated by the players?
That's a really good. Have you played Apocalypse World?
No.
Okay. Apocalypse World has a really clear, defined role for what's called the master of ceremonies, the game master, essentially.
Right. Yep.
You don't really do a lot unless the game is telling you it's time now to get involved. So the players can be these kind of attention hounds in that game, but they have to write and do all the work and and it's only the game master's job to say, okay, now it's time for you to roll dice. Okay, stop talking, now roll dice. And I think that's one of the things that D&D suffers from, because of the 40 years of habits that are built into it. And now you have a new generation coming in with, as you said earlier, their video game habits, and then seeing how much power they can put into their character, how many things that they can do. And I think Pathfinder probably suffered from this as well, because your first level characters can do so much, and they have 20 feats by the time they're 5th level because of how comboing works and whatnot. That every single time you do that, you're just taking more and more authority to get things done from the game master. And
for sure,
it's just a side effect of that level of design. It is. I don't have a solution other than to retrain people how to think about role-playing games, because the book, your anecdote about 1st edition is that they were guidelines and you're there to arbitrate, but that was a social contract that everybody agreed to.
Yes.
We're not agreeing to the same social contract when we sit down to play now, because you will have people that are more than willing to be helpful, and they end up getting overlooked because the loudest guy at the table is getting 40 more extra minutes of gameplay.
Right.
So let's take that in another direction real quick. What is how do you think the online gaming, so the streamed games, the more popular ones, how do you think those have kind of influenced that? Because you've got a ton. I mean, probably the majority of players now are new within the last 5 years, maybe. No, certainly no more than 10. I would say the vast majority of D&D players right now are in that short window that have experienced D&D through the Critical Roles type games. Do you think that is shaping people's perception of what?
It's shaping their expectations.
Sure.
Absolutely. I'm glad you really brought that up, because that's another thing where people don't realize these are actors, and they have prep time to talk about what they're going to do before they get up there and actually pretend they're improvising. And that gives people the impression that, oh, this is what D&D is going to be like when I sit down and play it. I don't think anybody comes to the table with that level of. Somebody did a MASH role-playing game,
Oh wow.
and all I could think was the writing on MASH was the best writing of the 70s and 80s on television. How am I supposed to get 5 people who think My Little Pony is good to sit down and write the quality of Larry Metcalf from MASH and write that kind of story with that level of drama and comedy at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I would never have thought to do a MASH role-playing game.
And
That's
part of
bonkers.
this, and to those who are watching too, I mean, this conversation is not necessarily is not necessarily about individual GMs. It's about the fact that we now have a culture of people who run these games. Not a culture. We have a culture of gaming, but we have a whole group, a new cadre of people running these games who run them very differently. And I think what 5e is telling us is that, I think I agree with Jim. It's more of a production I'm more of a producer or a director when I'm playing straight 5e with people, rather than like an L5R where it's definitely more story driven to begin with. And the GM in that game is really encouraged to be like involved in judging what's going on. So it's not just an individual game or system. It really is just the way people play these days.
So, to Jim's point, one of the things that really just bothers me about the big fantasy games is that people have, like you said, before even writing any backstory or having any sort of character ideas, they have a build. Okay. And I think if you come to the table with a build, you have already lost the game. You are there to win. You are not there to play. You're not there to experience and have fun and role play. You are there to win. And if that's one thing I could ever do, is to throw that concept out the window, light it on fire.
My game City of Mass that's coming out actually has a section in there called Session 0, and it tells you that you have to make your characters together because
Yes.
So many things are intertwined, and because of the culture of the city and everything else, the players have to know one another, because otherwise you can't play the game.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, so really, I think, isn't what we're boiling this all down to, and this is something I've been doing for a long time. The Session 0 for me usually takes 3 weeks, because we get together and we start kind of slow. We talk about stuff. We just had our first Session 0 on Friday, talking about this new campaign somebody wants me to run, and it all boiled down to us playing Conan, basically. So I'm gonna end up running this Conan thing for 12 weeks, and right away, the conversation over gin and tonics was, okay, not necessarily even how they knew each other, but why they were there. And then how they knew each other bubbled up out of that. And then if they had relationships, good, bad, and different, whatever. Doesn't that solve this problem? Just put out the word that you need to all sit in the same room. You all need to build a shared backstory.
The conceit of D&D in the day was that you were all out for adventure and glory and gold.
Sure.
And that's not the same anymore. That's not true anymore.
No.
Right.
And so if half the table is building characters the old way and half of them are building it, say, the second edition way, right, where everybody's a Ren Fair caricature, you have a different expectation as what the campaign's going to be about from the minute zero.
Right.
Sure.
So yeah, that's I guess I'm agreeing with you, but I'm saying it in a different way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think I talked over somebody.
You're fine.
Go ahead, Matt. You were going to say something.
I was, for sure. Go ahead.
I wasn't sure I had something I was going to say. Well,
It's almost like there's 3 camps that we've kind of doped out here. One is the old, hack and slash, I'm out for adventure guy. There's one that's there for, there's a player that's there to develop their character and their story arc, which is, I think, sounds like the camp that the majority of us are in. And then there's the person who just wants to win D&D. And I don't think any of those are wrong. It's just that if you are diametrically opposed, I don't think that any of them are, none of them are going to necessarily work very well together all the time. especially at like pickup game, like we've been discussing at a convention. But I think if you set those expectations from day one and come to some sort of agreement, you can have a good game.
Can I tell a story?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I ran D&D 5 at a convention recently. I wrote a story about Vecna. I tried to do the backstory of who he was before he was Vecna. And I did, half the game was told in flashback and half the game was told in media res at that moment as they're at the door to the tomb. And they all had, there was 5 players and 5 characters. They all had backgrounds written up about how they knew each other and why they were here in this moment. And I went around the table and I gave everybody maybe 10 different spotlight moments for their characters, for them to shine and allow them to do something in the role play, do something in combat, do something with their backstory, do something with how they're dealing with the fact that their buddy died before they even got here. And I had a range of different kind of players that showed up for this thing, but everybody walked away with, I've never played D&D that way before.
Yep.
And that, I hope that experience impacted somebody at some level to say, I'm going back to my group and we are not rolling D20s for 4 hours again. We're changing things up. And I think that's really the only tool left we have to make these changes, is to open people up to, it doesn't have, I'm not even say better, I'm saying just a different way of doing things, so they can see that D&D doesn't have to be a pull you by the nose, roll dice for 4 hours kind of game.
Yeah, well, because it's art, right? D&D, role-playing games in general, is art. It is an art form. Everyone begins in a different fashion. Everybody gets different enjoyment out of it. But when you boil it down, I think more and more, thanks to indie games, people are beginning to see that it is really about the role-playing. First edition D&D, you got XP for every gold piece of treasure that you found, right? It was baked into the rules that take stuff and get more powerful, right? 5th edition D&D now, magic items are optional. You don't even absolutely need them to be successful at the game. So it's more about the character. It's more about them. So I think we're seeing positive change, but yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to, I guess, just to kind of close out this little part of this segment, I would say that what we really maybe need is someone to put out a list of how to develop those guidelines to get people to do that. Sometimes it's just enough to have a good GM explain it. But like, for example, my way of doing it, I ask everybody to write down 3 things everyone would know about you if they see you, 2 things only your friends know about you, and 1 secret nobody knows. And they write them all down. And I said, we're not going to use all these, but does this give you some idea what your character is? Now write some statements about your character if you can, and start sharing it with other people around the table. And that works great for me and my players, but I bet you there's 20 different ways to do it that would encourage people to this way of thinking.
We do lies also.
Lies.
False truth.
No lie. Yeah.
One of the tools that I put into just about everything, and we were going to talk about protocol at some point.
Yeah, we'll
but I
get to that after the station break, Jim.
I have a game system called Protocol and another one called Praxis. And what I have in those game systems is built-in questions about other people. So I'm answering a question about you. So I have the ability at the beginning of the game, it says, who among you is hunted and wanted for stealing the Queen's jewels? Just as a stupid question off the top of my head. And now I get to pick somebody at the table and identify them as the troublemaker that has gotten us in this situation. And a lot of people who want absolute agency over their character don't like that kind of setup, but it builds immediate relationships and interconnectivity between characters when those questions are pointed that way.
Yeah, and what would be you don't know, nobody knows, but what is the point of that level of agency that they're seeking? Like, is it to just do and say whatever they want with no constraint from the beginning? Because I can't see that being a very long-lived or fruitful way of playing.
I think a lot of it stems from feeling powerless in our everyday lives, and people don't want to feel that way when they sit down.
That's a fucking fact.
That's a whole show in and of itself right there.
We'll have you back, Jim. You can tell us all about the psychological underpinnings of why nerds do what they do. Yeah, that's that. So far, I'm really kind of glad I skipped what got you into gaming, Jim.
So that was the first question. On to question number 2.
Podcasts like this are how I got into gaming.
Yeah, cool. So okay, I think we're gonna we ready to break and go to the open discussion? You want to stick around?
I'm ready for a
Jim?
break. Holy
I want
cow.
you to talk about protocol.